On Thursday, September 17, 1987, 28-year-old Jennifer Ann Morrison disappeared from Bellingham, Washington. The registered nurse at St. Joseph Hospital was last seen leaving her evening shift at 11:42 p.m., walking toward the staff parking lot on Ellis Street. Her 1984 Honda Accord was discovered at 7:15 a.m. the following morning in Whatcom Falls Park. Keys in the ignition, driver's door unlocked, purse on the passenger seat. Bellingham Police Department documented blood evidence on the steering wheel and dashboard. Case number 872847 went cold on January 22, 1988, after 127 days of investigation. In March 2019, 32 years after Morrison's disappearance, the Whatcom County Cold Case Unit submitted preserved blood evidence for advanced genealogical DNA analysis. The genetic profile was uploaded to GED Match, a public database containing over 1.2 million profiles. The results matched an individual who had worked in Bellingham's medical community during the 1980s. What detectives would discover about this person's relationship to Morrison would expose a pattern of predatory behavior that had been hidden behind professional credentials for over 3 decades. This investigation would become one of Washington State's most significant breakthroughs in forensic genealogy. It would reveal how a predator had exploited professional trust to conceal his crimes, and it would demonstrate that advances in DNA technology, combined with persistent investigative work, can finally deliver justice families have waited decades to receive. If you value stories like this and want to see more investigations into cold cases that were finally solved, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Please write your country in the comments below. Let's see how far around the world these stories travel. The case file sat in Box 1847C at the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office Evidence Storage Facility for 31 years before cold case detective Maria Santos pulled it from the metal shelving on a gray February morning in 2019. The box contained 247 pages of investigative reports, 89 photographs, 14 evidence bags, and one question that had never been answered. What happened to Jennifer Morrison between 11:42 p.m. on September 17, 1987, and dawn the following morning when her abandoned vehicle was discovered in Whatcom Falls Park? Santos had joined the cold case unit in 2017 after 12 years as a homicide detective. She had reviewed hundreds of unsolved cases, but something about the Morrison file caught her attention during her initial assessment. The blood evidence had been properly preserved. The original investigation had been thorough, and the case had simply stopped, not because detectives had exhausted leads, but because the technology to analyze the physical evidence didn't exist in 1988. When I opened that file, I saw a case that was begging to be solved. Santos would later testify in Whatcom County Superior Court. Everything was there. We just needed the science to catch up. Bellingham in September 1987 was a city of approximately 52,000 residents, nestled between the Cascade Mountains and Bellingham Bay in the northwestern corner of Washington State. The town maintained the atmosphere of a close-knit community despite being home to Western Washington University and serving as a gateway to the Canadian border, just 20 miles north. Jennifer Morrison had moved to Bellingham in June 1985, accepting a position in the intensive care unit at St. Joseph Hospital on Ellis Street. According to personnel records obtained from the hospital, Morrison was considered an exemplary employee. Her supervisor, ICU Director Patricia Hoffman, described her in a 1987 police interview as dedicated, compassionate, and remarkably skilled for someone with only 3 years of nursing experience. Morrison rented a 1-bedroom apartment at Cedar Park Apartments on Lakeway Drive. a two-story complex popular with hospital staff due to its proximity to St. Joseph. Unit 214 on the second floor faced east, providing morning sunlight that Morrison appreciated. The apartment was modestly furnished with items she had collected over her 2 years in Bellingham: a second-hand couch from a local thrift store, a small dining table where she often ate breakfast while reviewing medical journals, and walls decorated with photographs from her running events and family gatherings in Portland. Her neighbors described her as friendly but private. Margaret Chen, who lived in Unit 212 directly next door, recalled Morrison as always polite, always with a smile, but she kept to herself mostly. Chen remembered seeing Morrison leaving for early morning runs, typically around 6 a.m. before day shifts or in the late afternoon before evening shifts. Morrison's dedication to running was evident in her meticulous training schedule, which she kept posted on her refrigerator. According to her running log, recovered from her apartment during the investigation, Morrison had completed 4 half-marathons since moving to Bellingham. She logged between 35 and 45 miles per week, running along the scenic routes of Boulevard Park, the South Bay Trail, and occasionally venturing into the trails of Watcombe Falls Park during daylight hours. She was a member of the Bellingham Runners Club and participated in their Saturday morning group runs when her work schedule permitted. Jennifer was disciplined about her training, said club member Robert Davidson, who ran with Morrison on several occasions. She had set a goal to qualify for the Boston Marathon eventually. She was serious about it, kept detailed records of her times, her nutrition, everything. She was the kind of person who, when she committed to something, gave it everything. Morrison's commitment extended to her nursing career. According to ICU Director Patricia Hoffman, Morrison had expressed interest in pursuing additional certifications in critical care nursing. Hospital records show she had enrolled in a continuing education course at Western Washington University, scheduled to begin in January 1988. The course would run for 6 months, and upon completion, would qualify her for advanced ICU positions. Jennifer saw nursing as more than just a job, Hoffman explained in her interview with Detective Walsh. She was genuinely passionate about patient care. She volunteered for the difficult cases, stayed late when needed, and never complained about the demanding schedule. Patients loved her. Families trusted her. She had that rare combination of technical skill and genuine compassion. Morrison maintained close ties with her family in Portland, despite the 285-mile distance between Bellingham and her hometown. Her mother, Dorothy Morrison, a retired elementary school teacher, spoke to her daughter every Sunday evening without fail. These conversations typically lasted 30 to 45 minutes, covering topics ranging from Jennifer's work experiences to family news to discussions of Dorothy's garden and Jennifer's training progress. "Jennifer was my youngest," Dorothy Morrison told detectives during their initial interview on September 19, 1987, her voice breaking with emotion. "She called me every Sunday at 7 p.m. It was our routine. She never missed a call in the 2 years she'd been in Bellingham. Never. When Sunday the 20th came and the phone didn't ring, I waited until 8 p.m. Then I started calling her apartment. No answer. I called every hour until midnight. Monday morning, I called the hospital. That's when I learned she hadn't shown up for her shift. I knew immediately something was terribly wrong. Jennifer would never miss work without calling. Never." Morrison's father had passed away in 1982 from a heart attack, an event that family members suggested may have influenced Jennifer's decision to pursue nursing. Her older sister, Amanda, lived in Seattle with her husband and 2 young children. According to Amanda's statement to investigators, Jennifer visited Seattle approximately once a month, often timing her visits to coincide with local running events or to spend time with her niece and nephew, ages 5 and 3 in 1987. Jennifer was excited about life, Amanda Morrison Walsh recalled in her police interview. She had plans. She wanted to get her advanced certifications, maybe work in a trauma center eventually. She talked about possibly moving to Seattle to be closer to family. She was only 28. She had her whole life ahead of her. The idea that someone could have hurt her, that someone would want to hurt her, it doesn't make any sense. Jennifer never hurt anyone. She spent her life helping people. Morrison's social circle in Bellingham was modest but meaningful. She had formed friendships with several colleagues at St. Joseph Hospital, though her demanding schedule and training regimen limited her availability for extensive socializing. She occasionally attended dinners with fellow nurses, participated in hospital charity events, and was known to frequent the Village Books on Holly Street, where she purchased the mystery novels she enjoyed reading during her rare downtime. The bookstore manager, Patricia Reynolds, remembered Morrison as a regular customer. She came in every couple of weeks, Reynolds told investigators. Always bought mysteries or medical thrillers. She was quiet, polite, and she always knew exactly what she wanted. The last time I saw her was probably early September. She bought 2 books, paid cash, and left. Just a normal transaction, nothing unusual at all. Morrison's financial situation was stable but modest, consistent with a young nurse's salary in the late 1980s. Bank records subpoenaed during the investigation showed she earned approximately $32,000 annually from her hospital position. She maintained a checking account and a savings account at the Bellingham branch of Washington Federal with balances of $1,247 and $3,390 respectively on September 17, 1987. Her rent was $425 per month, and her car payment on the 1984 Honda Accord was $187 monthly. Credit card records showed typical expenses: groceries, running gear purchased from local sporting goods stores, occasional dinners at Bellingham restaurants, and monthly payments for utilities and phone service. There were no unusual transactions, no large cash withdrawals, nothing suggesting financial distress or involvement in any risky activities. Jennifer lived a quiet, responsible life, Detective Walsh noted in his investigative summary. There was nothing in her background, her habits, her relationships, or her finances that suggested any reason someone would target her. She appeared to be, in every respect, a low-risk victim, which made her disappearance all the more troubling. Morrison had no romantic relationships at the time of her disappearance, according to all available evidence. Friends and family consistently stated she was not dating anyone and had not mentioned any romantic interests. Her last known relationship had been during nursing school in Portland, ending amicably in early 1984. Since moving to Bellingham, she had focused primarily on establishing her career and pursuing her athletic goals. Jennifer told me she wanted to wait until she was more established before getting serious about dating, her friend and fellow nurse Sandra Reynolds explained to detectives. She felt like she was in a building phase of her life. She wanted to get her advanced certifications, build her savings, maybe buy a house eventually. She said there would be time for relationships later. She was only 28. She thought she had plenty of time. This focus on career and personal goals made Morrison's disappearance particularly baffling to investigators. She had no known conflicts, no apparent enemies, no risky behaviors that might have exposed her to danger. She followed predictable routines, lived modestly, and maintained appropriate professional boundaries in her interactions with patients and colleagues. In many ways, Jennifer Morrison represented exactly the type of person who should have been safe, forensic psychologist Dr. Rebecca Chen, who consulted on the case in 2019, explained in her analysis. She was cautious without being paranoid, aware of her surroundings, maintained healthy boundaries, and lived a lifestyle that minimized risk exposure. yet she still became a victim. It underscores the reality that predators don't select victims based on logic or fairness. They exploit opportunities and vulnerabilities that may be invisible to everyone except them. The question that haunted investigators from the beginning was simple yet profound. What opportunity did someone see in Jennifer Morrison's predictable routine? And who had been watching closely enough to recognize and exploit that opportunity on the night of September 17, 1987? The events of September 17, 1987 began unremarkably. Hospital records indicate Morrison clocked in for her evening shift at 3:17 p.m. She worked in the ICU alongside two other nurses that evening, Sandra Reynolds and Michael Chen. Both would later provide detailed statements to investigators. According to the shift log maintained by the ICU nursing station, the evening proceeded normally until approximately 9:30 p.m., when a patient in bed 7 experienced respiratory distress. Morrison responded immediately, working alongside Dr. Thomas Whitmore, the attending physician, to stabilize the patient. The crisis was resolved by 10:15 p.m., and Morrison returned to her regular duties. At 11:42 p.m., Morrison clocked out using the hospital's punch card system. Security camera footage from the hospital's main entrance, reviewed by detectives, showed Morrison exiting through the automatic doors at 11:43 p.m. She was wearing her nursing uniform under a light blue windbreaker, carrying a canvas tote bag over her right shoulder. The security footage captured Morrison walking west on Ellis Street toward the staff parking lot, a paved area behind the hospital that accommodated approximately 40 vehicles. The lot was illuminated by 4 overhead sodium vapor lights, though the far western section, where Morrison typically parked, received limited illumination due to overhanging trees. The security camera angle did not extend to the parking lot itself. Morrison disappeared from view at 11:44 p.m. She would never be seen alive again. When Morrison failed to report for her scheduled 3 p.m. shift on Friday, September 18th, Supervisor Patricia Hoffman attempted to contact her by telephone at 3:15 p.m. There was no answer. Hoffman called Morrison's apartment again at 3:45 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. Both calls went unanswered. Jennifer was extremely reliable, Hoffman stated in her police interview. In 2 years, she had never missed a shift without calling. I was concerned immediately. At 5:20 p.m., Hoffman contacted Morrison's listed emergency contact, her mother Dorothy in Portland. Dorothy Morrison had not heard from her daughter since their regular Sunday evening phone call on September 13th. She provided police with the names of Jennifer's closest friends in Bellingham. Bellingham Police Department received the missing person report at 6:47 p.m. on September 18th. Officer David Larson was dispatched to conduct a welfare check at Morrison's apartment at 7:15 p.m. The apartment manager, Robert Chen, accompanied Larson and unlocked the door. According to Larson's report, the apartment showed no signs of disturbance. Mail from Thursday and Friday was in the mailbox. The bed was made. A half-full coffee cup sat on the kitchen counter. The bathroom contained a wet towel, suggesting Morrison had showered before her Thursday evening shift. Her running shoes were by the door. Her checkbook and wallet were on the dresser. Nothing appeared to be missing or out of place. What was notably absent was Morrison herself and her car, the 1984 Honda Accord she had purchased used in June 1987. At 7:45 p.m., Officer Larson filed an official missing person report. Detective Raymond Walsh of the Bellingham Police Department was assigned to the case at 8:30 p.m. Walsh, a 16-year veteran of the department, immediately recognized the concerning elements of the situation. A reliable young woman, missing after leaving work late at night, with no logical explanation for her disappearance. Walsh initiated a search of the route between St. Joseph Hospital and Morrison's apartment, a distance of approximately 2.4 miles. Officers checked roadside areas, drainage ditches, and parking lots. They found nothing. At 6:40 a.m. on September 19th, Robert Martinez, a groundskeeper for the Bellingham Parks Department, arrived for his morning shift at Watcombe Falls Park. The park, located approximately 1.8 miles southeast of St. Joseph Hospital, encompassed 241 acres of forested land with multiple trails, a creek, and several parking areas. Martinez was conducting his routine inspection of the north parking lot when he observed a blue Honda Accord parked in the far corner of the lot, near the trailhead leading to Watcombe Creek. The vehicle had not been there when he left the previous evening at 4:30 p.m. Martinez approached the vehicle and observed that the driver's door was unlocked and slightly ajar. The keys were in the ignition. A brown leather purse sat on the passenger seat. Martinez immediately contacted the Parks Department office, and Park Supervisor Linda Foster called the Bellingham Police Department at 6:52 a.m. Officer Larson, still on duty from the night shift, responded to the scene at 7:03 a.m. He ran the license plate through the system and confirmed it was registered to Jennifer Morrison. He secured the scene and contacted Detective Walsh at 7:15 a.m. Walsh arrived at Watcombe Falls Park at 7:42 a.m., accompanied by evidence technician Scott Palmer. Palmer photographed the vehicle from multiple angles before conducting a detailed examination. His findings, documented in Evidence Report 87-2847-01, were significant. The Honda Accord's interior showed signs of a struggle. The steering wheel contained what appeared to be blood smears. Additional blood spatter was visible on the driver's side window and dashboard. The rearview mirror had been knocked askew. A pair of women's glasses, later identified as belonging to Morrison, lay broken on the floor mat. Palmer collected blood samples from 3 locations in the vehicle. He photographed and collected the broken glasses. He dusted the car for fingerprints, lifting 23 usable prints from various surfaces. The purse on the passenger seat contained Morrison's wallet with $47 in cash, her driver's license, credit cards, and her hospital ID badge. Her car keys were in the ignition. The scene suggested a violent encounter, Walsh noted in his report. The victim's personal belongings were left behind, indicating robbery was not the motive. The blood evidence and signs of struggle pointed to foul play. A search of Watcombe Falls Park began at 8:30 a.m. on September 19th. The Bellingham Police Department mobilized 15 officers to conduct a grid search of the area surrounding the north parking lot. The search expanded throughout the day to include the creek, trails, and forested sections of the park. Search and rescue dogs from the Watcombe County Sheriff's Office arrived at 11 a.m. The dogs were given Morrison's scent from clothing obtained from her apartment. They tracked from the Honda Accord toward the creek, but lost the scent approximately 200 yards from the parking lot near a heavily trafficked trail junction. The search continued for 5 days. On September 20th, the effort expanded to include volunteer searchers from the community. Over 150 volunteers participated in the systematic search of Watcombe Falls Park and surrounding areas. They found no trace of Jennifer Morrison. The volunteer search effort represented the Bellingham community's immediate response to Morrison's disappearance. Organized by the Bellingham Runners Club and coordinated with the Watcombe County Sheriff's Office, volunteers arrived at the park starting at 7 a.m. on September 20th. They were divided into teams of 8 to 10 people, each team assigned a specific grid section to search systematically. Search Coordinator Deputy Thomas Wilson, a 22-year veteran with the Sheriff's Office, briefed volunteers on proper search procedures. "We're looking for anything unusual," Wilson instructed the assembled crowd that Sunday morning, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Disturbed soil, broken vegetation, torn fabric, personal items, anything that seems out of place. If you find something, don't touch it. Mark the location and call for a deputy immediately." The volunteers included Morrison's colleagues from St. Joseph Hospital, members of her running club, Western Washington University students, and Bellingham residents who had seen her photograph on the missing person flyers that had been distributed throughout the city. The flyers, printed by Detective Walsh's team on Friday, September 18th, featured Morrison's hospital ID photograph and detailed her physical description: 5 feet 6 inches tall, 125 pounds, brown hair worn in a shoulder-length style, brown eyes, last seen wearing nursing scrubs under a light blue windbreaker. Sandra Reynolds, Morrison's ICU colleague and friend, was among the searchers. "We were all in shock," Reynolds recalled in a 2019 interview. "Jennifer was one of us. She was our friend. The idea that she could just vanish like that, it was terrifying. We wanted to do something, anything. So we searched. We walked through those woods for hours, looking behind every tree, in every ravine, hoping we'd find her, praying we'd find her alive." The search area expanded beyond Whatcom Falls Park to include adjacent properties, trails, and roadways. Teams walked shoulder to shoulder through dense forest sections, checked drainage culverts along roads, examined abandoned structures, and searched the banks of Whatcom Creek. The creek itself was walked by search and rescue personnel equipped with waders and probing poles. The terrain was challenging, Deputy Wilson noted in his report. Dense vegetation, steep slopes in some areas, and the creek complicating access. But we were thorough. Every section was searched by at least 2 separate teams to ensure nothing was missed. On September 21st, the search expanded to Lake Whatcom, a large body of water approximately 3 miles from the park. Sheriff's Office dive teams conducted searches of the lake's accessible shoreline areas, focusing on locations that could be reached from public roads. The operation lasted 2 days, but yielded no results. By September 23rd, after 5 days of intensive searching, involving hundreds of volunteers and law enforcement personnel covering over 1,000 acres, the physical search was suspended. No trace of Jennifer Morrison had been found beyond her abandoned vehicle in the park. The investigation shifted to traditional detective work, interviews, background checks, and following up on tips called in to the dedicated hotline established for the case. The tip line, 360-555 TIPS, received over 200 calls in the first week. Each call was logged, evaluated, and investigated. Some reported sightings of Morrison or her vehicle on the night of September 17th. Others suggested potential suspects or theories about what might have happened. Many were expressions of concern from community members or offers to help with continued searches. Detective Walsh and his team followed up on every credible lead. A reported sighting of Morrison's Honda Accord near the Canadian border on September 18th was investigated thoroughly. Border Patrol records were reviewed. No record of Morrison or her vehicle crossing into Canada was found. The sighting was determined to be a case of mistaken identification. A call suggesting Morrison might have had a secret boyfriend was pursued through interviews with her friends, family, and colleagues. No evidence of any romantic relationship was discovered. Her phone records showed no pattern of calls to any romantic interest. Her co-workers unanimously stated they had never seen her with anyone in a romantic context. Several calls suggested Morrison might have voluntarily disappeared to start a new life. This theory was examined and rejected. Her bank accounts remained untouched after September 17th. Her credit cards were never used after that date. She had made no preparations suggesting planned flight, no large cash withdrawals, no canceled subscriptions, no resignation from her job, no indication to family or friends of any desire to leave her life in Bellingham. Everything about Jennifer's life suggested she was happy, settled, and planning for the future. Detective Walsh explained in a press conference on September 25, 1987. She had enrolled in continuing education courses starting in January. She had discussed holiday plans with her family. She had training goals for the spring marathon season. Nothing suggests voluntary disappearance. We are treating this as a missing person case under suspicious circumstances, and we are pursuing all investigative leads. Detective Walsh conducted interviews with Morrison's co-workers, friends, and acquaintances throughout the week of September 20, 26. A pattern emerged. Morrison was well-liked, responsible, and had no known conflicts with anyone. She was not involved in any romantic relationships. She had no known enemies. Her financial records showed no irregularities. Her phone records revealed routine calls to her mother in Portland and occasional calls to friends. The investigation focused on several key questions. How did Morrison's car end up in Whatcom Falls Park when she had parked at the hospital? Who drove the vehicle there? What happened to Morrison between leaving the hospital and the discovery of her abandoned car? Security footage from businesses near the route between the hospital and the park was obtained and reviewed. A traffic camera at the intersection of Ellis Street and Lakeway Drive captured Morrison's Honda Accord passing through at 11:51 p.m. on September 17th, 9 minutes after she left the hospital. The camera quality was insufficient to identify the driver. On September 28, 1987, the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office officially classified Morrison as an endangered missing person and assumed jurisdiction of the investigation. Detective Walsh continued to work the case alongside Sheriff's Detective Linda Crawford. The blood evidence collected from Morrison's vehicle was sent to the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory in Marysville on September 30th. Forensic scientist Barbara Chen conducted ABO blood typing analysis. The blood samples matched Morrison's blood type, O positive. However, ABO typing could only confirm blood type, not individual identity. In 1987, DNA profiling was in its infancy and not yet available for routine criminal investigations. We knew the blood was consistent with the victim's type, Detective Walsh explained in a 2019 interview. But that's where the science stopped. We couldn't do anything more with it. The investigation pursued multiple theories. Had Morrison been abducted from the hospital parking lot? Had someone she knew offered her a ride? Had she encountered someone at Whatcom Falls Park? Each theory was explored thoroughly, but no evidence pointed definitively in any direction. Detective Crawford conducted a comprehensive review of all personnel who had been at St. Joseph Hospital on the evening of September 17th. This included 47 hospital employees working various shifts, 19 patients in the facility, and visiting family members who had signed in at the front desk. Each individual was interviewed. Background checks were conducted. Alibis were verified. No suspects emerged. The hospital employee interviews consumed most of Detective Crawford's time during the final week of September 1987. She developed a systematic approach, conducting interviews in a private office made available by hospital administration. Each interview was documented with detailed notes, and many were audio recorded with the subject's permission. The interviews revealed a consistent portrait of St. Joseph Hospital as a professionally run facility with generally positive workplace culture. Employees described normal workplace dynamics. Some people were better liked than others, minor complaints about scheduling or management decisions, but no serious conflicts that might relate to Morrison's disappearance. Several employees mentioned that Morrison was well regarded by everyone. Not a single person interviewed expressed any negative sentiment about her. This unanimity was noteworthy to Crawford, who noted in her report, "In my experience, when everyone speaks positively about a missing person, it either indicates genuine universal admiration or that people are being careful about what they say because the person is missing. In Morrison's case, The specific examples and anecdotes people shared suggested genuine admiration. She appears to have been truly well-liked. The interview with Dr. Robert Allen Pritchard took place on September 22, 1987, at 2:30 p.m. in the hospital administrative office. Pritchard, age 32, had worked as an emergency room physician at St. Joseph Hospital since March 1985. He had completed his medical degree at the University of Washington School of Medicine in 1982 and his emergency medicine residency at Harbor View Medical Center in Seattle in 1985. According to the interview transcript, Detective Crawford began by explaining the purpose of the interview: to gather information about Morrison's routine, workplace relationships, and the events of September 17th. Pritchard appeared cooperative and expressed shock at Morrison's disappearance. "I couldn't believe it when I heard," Pritchard stated, according to Crawford's notes. "Jennifer was such a dedicated nurse. Everyone in the hospital respected her. The idea that something happened to her is just terrible." Crawford asked about Pritchard's schedule on September 17th. He confirmed he had worked the evening shift in the emergency room, starting at 3 p.m. and ending at 11 p.m. Hospital records corroborated this. His last patient of the shift, according to ER logs, was treated at 10:37 p.m., a minor laceration requiring 4 stitches. Pritchard completed his charting and left the hospital at approximately 11:05 p.m. "I went straight home," Pritchard told Crawford. "I was tired. It had been a busy shift. I drove home, which takes about 15 minutes, and I was in my apartment by 11:20 or so. I made a sandwich, watched television for maybe 30 minutes, and went to bed around midnight." Pritchard lived at the Windermere Apartments on Lakeway Drive, approximately 2.1 miles from St. Joseph Hospital. He lived alone in a 1-bedroom unit. When asked if anyone could verify his arrival home, Pritchard stated no one could. He hadn't spoken to neighbors that night and had made no phone calls. Crawford asked about Pritchard's relationship with Morrison. "Professional only," Pritchard responded. "The ICU and ER don't interact a lot in terms of daily operations. Sometimes if we admitted a patient to ICU, we'd give a handoff report to the ICU nurses. Jennifer was always professional, thorough, asked good questions. But we didn't socialize outside of work. I might have seen her in the cafeteria a few times, but we weren't friends or anything like that." Crawford inquired whether Pritchard had noticed anything unusual about Morrison's behavior on September 17th or in the days leading up to her disappearance. Pritchard stated he hadn't interacted with Morrison that day and couldn't recall seeing her in the hospital, which was not unusual given they worked in different departments. The interview lasted 27 minutes. Crawford noted in her report that Pritchard appeared nervous during the interview, but she attributed this to the normal discomfort people experience when being interviewed by police. Subject was cooperative and provided straightforward answers, Crawford wrote. No indicators of deception detected. No obvious connection to victim beyond workplace association. No reason to pursue further at this time. This assessment would prove to be tragically wrong, but in 1987, with no physical evidence connecting Pritchard to Morrison's vehicle and no witnesses placing him in the parking lot or at Whatcom Falls Park, there was no basis to view him as a suspect. He was simply one of 47 hospital employees interviewed as part of the comprehensive investigation. In hindsight, after Pritchard's arrest in 2019, investigators would examine that 1987 interview with fresh eyes. Certain elements would take on new significance. Pritchard's mention of being tired after his shift, potentially explaining why he might have been in the parking lot at 11:44 p.m. when Morrison left. His statement about going straight home, which could not be verified. His claim of having no significant interaction with Morrison, which might have been designed to distance himself from her. But in September 1987, none of these elements raised red flags. Pritchard was an educated, professional physician with no criminal record and no apparent motive to harm Morrison. The interview was documented and filed, and the investigation moved on to other leads. The investigation also examined recent criminal activity in the Bellingham area. No similar incidents had been reported. No known sexual predators or violent offenders lived in the immediate vicinity of the hospital or Whatcom Falls Park. Every registered sex offender in Whatcom County was interviewed, and their whereabouts on September 17th verified. By December 1987, the active investigation had produced no viable leads. Detective Walsh submitted a comprehensive report on December 18th, documenting all investigative efforts. The case remained open, but without new leads to pursue. The blood evidence was placed in long-term storage at the Whatcom County Sheriff's Evidence Facility. Jennifer Morrison's disappearance became a cold case. The Morrison family never stopped searching for answers. Dorothy Morrison traveled to Bellingham multiple times throughout 1988 and 1989, meeting with detectives, distributing flyers, and pleading for anyone with information to come forward. She established a $10,000 reward fund for information leading to the resolution of her daughter's case. Not knowing what happened is the cruelest thing, Dorothy Morrison told the Bellingham Herald in a December 1989 interview marking the second anniversary of her daughter's disappearance. Every day, I wake up hoping today will be the day we get answers. Every day, I go to sleep with the same questions. Jennifer Morrison's case was periodically reviewed by detectives over the following decades. In 1995, when DNA analysis became more widely available in criminal investigations, the blood evidence from Morrison's vehicle was analyzed using PCR-based DNA testing. The analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Morrison, but there was insufficient material to develop a full DNA profile that could be searched in databases. The case was reviewed again in 2003 when the FBI's combined DNA index system, CODIS, became fully operational. However, the limited DNA evidence from 1987 was not suitable for upload to the system using the technology available at that time. By 2010, Morrison's case file had been transferred to the Whatcom County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit, established in 2009 to specifically address unsolved homicides and missing persons cases using advances in forensic science and investigative techniques. The case sat dormant until February 2019, when Detective Maria Santos began her systematic review of all cold cases in Whatcom County with preserved biological evidence. The Morrison case file was one of 23 cases Santos identified as potentially solvable using genetic genealogy, a revolutionary investigative technique that had solved several high-profile cold cases in 2018, including the Golden State Killer case in California. Genetic genealogy works by uploading DNA profiles to public genealogical databases where individuals have voluntarily submitted their DNA for ancestry research. When a DNA profile from a crime scene matches relatives in these databases, investigators can construct family trees to identify potential suspects. On March 4, 2019, Detective Santos submitted the preserved blood evidence from Morrison's vehicle to Parabon Nanolabs, a private DNA technology company in Virginia specializing in forensic genetic genealogy. The lab extracted DNA from the sample and developed a complete genetic profile suitable for genealogical analysis. The sample quality was remarkable considering its age, explained Dr. Ellen Mitchell, the Parabon forensic geneticist who processed the evidence. Proper storage had preserved the DNA integrity. We were able to develop a full SNP profile suitable for genealogical database searching. On April 18, 2019, Parabon uploaded the DNA profile to GEDmatch, a public genealogical database. Within hours, the system identified multiple matches indicating the DNA donor had relatives in the database. The closest match was a second cousin, sharing approximately 3.2% of DNA with the unknown individual. Dr. Mitchell and her team constructed a family tree working backward from the GED matches. Over the course of 3 weeks, they built a comprehensive genealogical chart identifying a common ancestral couple born in the 1880s. From there, they worked forward through generations, identifying all descendants. On May 9, 2019, the Parabon team provided Detective Santos with a report identifying 4 potential suspects, men who fit the age range to have been adults in 1987, who had geographical connections to Bellingham, and who descended from the identified ancestral couple. Detective Santos began the painstaking process of investigating each potential suspect. 3 of the 4 were quickly eliminated based on confirmed alibis, death records, or proven location outside of Washington state in September 1987. The 4th potential suspect was Dr. Robert Allen Pritchard, age 64, a retired physician living in Olympia, Washington. According to records obtained by Detective Santos, Pritchard had worked at St. Joseph Hospital in Bellingham from 1985 to 1989 as an emergency room physician. He would have been 32 years old in September 1987. When I saw that name and realized he had worked at the same hospital at the same time, I felt everything click into place, Santos testified at trial. This wasn't a random stranger. This was someone who had access to Jennifer Morrison. Detective Santos conducted a comprehensive background investigation of Robert Pritchard. She obtained his employment records from St. Joseph Hospital, which showed he had been on duty in the emergency room on the evening of September 17, 1987. His shift had ended at 11 p.m., approximately 42 minutes before Morrison left the hospital. Santos reviewed the original 1987 investigation files. Pritchard had been interviewed by Detective Walsh on September 22, 1987, as part of the comprehensive sweep of hospital personnel. In that interview, Pritchard stated he had left the hospital immediately after his shift ended at 11 p.m. and driven directly home to his apartment on Lakeway Drive, approximately 15 minutes from the hospital. He stated he had no interaction with Morrison that evening and did not know her personally beyond casual professional acquaintance. The 1987 investigation had not identified any reason to view Pritchard as a suspect. His alibi of being at home could not be verified, but there was no evidence connecting him to the crime. He was not interviewed again. In May 2019, Detective Santos obtained Pritchard's current address in Olympia and conducted surveillance. On May 15th, she observed Pritchard leaving his residence to take out garbage. When Pritchard returned to his house, Santos and her partner, Detective James Ford, retrieved the discarded items, which included a coffee cup and several paper towels. On May 16, 2019, the coffee cup was submitted to the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory for DNA analysis. On May 22, the lab confirmed the DNA from the coffee cup matched the DNA from the blood evidence in Morrison's vehicle. The probability of the DNA belonging to anyone other than Robert Pritchard was approximately 1 in 47 trillion, testified State Crime Lab DNA analyst Patricia Wong at trial. On June 3, 2019, Detective Santos obtained an arrest warrant for Robert Allen Pritchard for the murder of Jennifer Morrison. A team of detectives from the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, accompanied by Olympia Police Department officers, arrived at Pritchard's residence at 6:15 a.m. on June 4th. Pritchard was arrested without incident. He was transported to the Whatcom County Jail and booked on charges of second-degree murder. His bail was set at $2 million. The arrest of Robert Pritchard sent shockwaves through both Bellingham and Olympia medical communities. Pritchard had worked as an emergency room physician for 35 years before retiring in 2018. He had no criminal record. Colleagues described him as skilled and professional. He had been married for 40 years and had 3 adult children. The arrest was absolutely shocking to everyone who knew him, stated Dr. Michael Torres, who had worked alongside Pritchard at Providence St. Peter Hospital in Olympia from 2005 to 2018. Bob seemed like the last person on earth who would be capable of something like this. Pritchard's attorney, David Brennan of Seattle, immediately issued a statement maintaining his client's innocence and questioning the reliability of genetic genealogy as an investigative technique. DNA in a vehicle does not prove murder, Brennan stated. We intend to vigorously defend against these charges and expose the problematic assumptions underlying this arrest. The investigation continued after Pritchard's arrest. Detectives obtained search warrants for Pritchard's home, vehicles, and financial records. They conducted interviews with his family members, colleagues, and acquaintances dating back to his time in Bellingham. A significant discovery emerged during the search of Pritchard's Olympia residence. In a storage box in the basement, detectives found a folder containing newspaper clippings about Jennifer Morrison's disappearance. The articles dated from September and October 1987. One clipping had a handwritten note in the margin. They'll never know. Investigators also discovered that Pritchard had abruptly left Bellingham in April 1989, taking a position at a hospital in Spokane. According to colleagues interviewed from that period, Pritchard had cited wanting a change and better opportunities. However, the timing, less than 2 years after Morrison's disappearance, raised questions. Predators often relocate after committing crimes, explained forensic psychologist Dr. Rebecca Chen, who was retained as a consultant on the case. It allows them to escape scrutiny and start fresh where no one knows their history. Further investigation revealed a troubling pattern. Detectives contacted the Spokane Police Department and requested a review of any unsolved cases involving missing or murdered women during Pritchard's tenure there from 1989 to 1995. One case bore similarities. A 26-year-old nurse had been found dead in her apartment in August 1993, the victim of an apparent sexual assault and strangulation. The case had never been solved. DNA evidence from that case was compared to Pritchard's profile. There was no match. However, the similarities were noted in the investigative file. Robert Pritchard was arraigned in Whatcom County Superior Court on June 7, 2019, before Judge Thomas Morrison, no relation to the victim. Pritchard pleaded not guilty to charges of second-degree murder. His trial was scheduled for March 2020. The prosecution, led by Whatcom County Senior Deputy Prosecutor Laura Henderson, faced the challenge of proving a murder case with no body, no eyewitnesses, and DNA evidence as the primary physical evidence. The case would rest on establishing that Pritchard had the opportunity, means, and motive to kill Morrison, and that the DNA evidence proved he was responsible for the blood in her vehicle. The trial began on March 2, 2020, in Whatcom County Superior Court. The proceedings would last 3 weeks and involve testimony from 37 witnesses. The courtroom was packed daily with Morrison's family members, media representatives, and members of the public. Prosecutor Henderson's opening statement laid out the state's theory. Robert Pritchard, who had ended his emergency room shift at 11 p.m. on September 17, 1987, had waited in the hospital parking lot for Morrison to finish her shift. When Morrison walked to her car at approximately 11:44 p.m., Pritchard approached her. An altercation ensued. Morrison was struck, causing bleeding. Pritchard forced Morrison into her own vehicle and drove to Whatcom Falls Park. There, he removed Morrison from the vehicle and took her into the forested area where he killed her and concealed her body. He then left the scene, likely on foot or via a second vehicle. The DNA doesn't lie, Henderson told the jury. Robert Pritchard's blood was in that vehicle because he was there when Jennifer Morrison was attacked. The evidence will show that he is responsible for her death, even though her body has never been recovered. Defense attorney Brennan's opening statement challenged the prosecution's theory. He argued the DNA evidence proved only that Pritchard's blood was in the vehicle at some point, not that he had killed Morrison. He suggested alternative explanations. Perhaps Morrison had given Pritchard a ride at some earlier point, and he had sustained a minor injury. Perhaps blood transfer had occurred through some innocent means. He emphasized the lack of a body, lack of eyewitnesses, and lack of any other physical evidence connecting Pritchard to the alleged crime. The state wants you to convict based on speculation and assumptions, Brennan argued. But the Constitution requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt. DNA in a car, by itself, does not meet that standard. The prosecution's case unfolded over 2 weeks. Dorothy Morrison, now 81 years old, provided emotional testimony about her daughter's character, habits, and reliability. She described receiving the devastating call about Jennifer's disappearance and the 32 years of uncertainty that followed. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Mother's Day, I wondered if Jennifer was alive somewhere, Dorothy Morrison testified, her voice breaking. The not knowing was unbearable. But now we know. Someone took my daughter from me, and he's sitting right there. Patricia Hoffman, the former ICU director, testified about Morrison's exemplary performance and reliability. She confirmed Morrison had worked her scheduled shift on September 17, 1987, and left the hospital at her normal time. Former Detective Raymond Walsh, now 78 and retired, provided detailed testimony about the original 1987 investigation. He walked the jury through the timeline, the discovery of the abandoned vehicle, the blood evidence, and the extensive search efforts. He acknowledged that Pritchard had been interviewed as part of the routine canvass of hospital personnel, but had not been identified as a suspect at that time. We interviewed everyone who worked at that hospital, Walsh testified. Dr. Pritchard told us he went straight home after his shift. We had no reason to disbelieve him. We had no evidence connecting him to Jennifer Morrison. If we had the DNA technology, then that we have now, this case would have been solved 32 years ago. Detective Maria Santos testified about reopening the cold case in 2019 and the genetic genealogy investigation that led to identifying Pritchard as a suspect. She explained the process of building family trees from DNA matches and how Pritchard emerged as the only viable suspect with direct connection to the victim and opportunity to commit the crime. Dr. Ellen Mitchell from Parabon Nanolabs provided detailed testimony about the genetic genealogy process. She explained how DNA from the blood evidence was uploaded to genealogical databases, how family trees were constructed from DNA matches, and how the investigation narrowed to identify Pritchard. Genetic genealogy has revolutionized cold case investigations, Dr. Mitchell testified. It allows us to identify suspects even when their DNA isn't in law enforcement databases. The science is sound, and the results in this case were conclusive. Patricia Wong, the DNA analyst from the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, testified about the DNA comparison between the blood evidence and Pritchard's reference sample. She explained the statistical probability of the match and the extremely low likelihood of the DNA belonging to anyone other than Pritchard. The prosecution introduced the newspaper clippings found in Pritchard's basement as evidence of consciousness of guilt. Handwriting analysis confirmed the margin note, "They'll never know," had been written by Pritchard. Why would an innocent person keep newspaper clippings about a missing co-worker for 32 years? Henderson asked the jury. And why would he write that note unless he had something to hide? The prosecution also presented testimony from 3 women who had worked with Pritchard at St. Joseph Hospital in the 1980s. Each described incidents where Pritchard had made them uncomfortable with inappropriate comments or unwanted attention. One nurse, Karen Thompson, testified that Pritchard had followed her to her car after a late shift in 1986 and made sexual advances. She had reported the incident to hospital administration, but no formal action was taken. "Dr. Pritchard made me feel unsafe," Thompson testified. "I started asking other nurses to walk to the parking lot with me after evening shifts. We all knew to avoid being alone with him." The defense case focused on creating reasonable doubt. Brennan called forensic experts who questioned whether blood evidence alone was sufficient to prove murder. He emphasized the lack of a body, lack of witnesses, and lack of any other physical evidence. Dr. Richard Foster, a forensic pathologist retained by the defense, testified that without a body, it was impossible to determine cause of death, manner of death, or even confirm that Morrison was dead. For all we know, Jennifer Morrison could have walked away from that car voluntarily and be alive somewhere today, Foster suggested. The defense also called character witnesses who testified about Pritchard's reputation as a skilled, dedicated physician. His wife, Margaret Pritchard, testified that her husband had been home on the evening of September 17, 1987, though she acknowledged she could not recall the specific evening with certainty after 32 years. Pritchard himself chose not to testify, exercising his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Closing arguments began on March 23, 2020. Prosecutor Henderson emphasized the totality of the evidence. Pritchard's presence at the hospital when Morrison disappeared, his documented pattern of inappropriate behavior toward female colleagues, his blood in Morrison's vehicle, the newspaper clippings, and the sudden relocation from Bellingham, less than 2 years after the crime. Robert Pritchard had opportunity. He had a history of predatory behavior, and his DNA proves he was in that vehicle when Jennifer Morrison was attacked. Henderson argued. He kept those newspaper clippings because he thought he had gotten away with it. He thought they would never know. But science caught up with him. Justice caught up with him. And now, you have the power to hold him accountable. Defense attorney Brennan argued the prosecution had failed to prove murder beyond reasonable doubt. Yes, Dr. Pritchard's blood was in that car, Brennan conceded. But that doesn't prove he killed anyone. The state has asked you to speculate, to assume, to fill in gaps with theories. But that's not how our justice system works. When you carefully examine the actual evidence, not the prosecution's theories, you'll see there is reasonable doubt everywhere in this case. The jury deliberated for 11 hours over 3 days. On March 26, 2020, they returned a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Robert Pritchard showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read. Several Morrison family members wept quietly in the gallery. Sentencing was scheduled for May 15, 2020. Under Washington state sentencing guidelines, second-degree murder carried a standard range of 123 to 220 months in prison. However, the actual sentencing hearing was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic and courthouse closures. On August 14, 2020, Robert Pritchard appeared via video link from Whatcom County Jail for his sentencing hearing before Judge Morrison. The hearing provided an opportunity for victim impact statements. Dorothy Morrison, appearing via video link from Portland, addressed the court in a statement that took nearly 15 minutes to read. She described 32 years of grief, uncertainty, and unanswered questions. She described missing her daughter's wedding that would never happen, grandchildren who would never be born, and holidays forever marked by Jennifer's absence. "You took my daughter's life," Dorothy Morrison said, looking directly at Pritchard's image on screen. You took her future, her dreams, everything she could have been, and then you went on living your life, having a career, a family, normalcy, while we lived in agony. I hope that every day you spend in prison, you think about what you took from Jennifer, from us, from the world. Jennifer's younger sister, Amanda Morrison Walsh, now 52, also provided a victim impact statement. She described growing up in the shadow of her sister's disappearance, the toll it took on her family, and her relief that justice had finally been served. For 32 years, we didn't know if we would ever have answers, Amanda stated. We didn't know if the person who killed Jennifer was still out there, if he had hurt others. Now we know. And while it doesn't bring Jennifer back, it means she can finally rest, and so can we. Judge Morrison addressed Pritchard directly before imposing sentence. You were in a position of trust as a physician. You violated that trust in the worst possible way. You took an innocent life, concealed the crime, and lived freely for 32 years while the Morrison family suffered. The sentence I impose today can never restore what you took, but it does represent society's condemnation of your actions. Judge Morrison sentenced Pritchard to 220 months, 18 years and 4 months, in state prison, the maximum sentence under the standard range. With credit for time served since his arrest in June 2019, Pritchard would be eligible for release in 2037, when he would be 82 years old. Pritchard was remanded to the Washington State Department of Corrections and transferred to the Coyote Ridge Correction Center in Connell, Washington, to begin serving his sentence. Defense attorney Brennan filed a notice of appeal on September 1, 2020, arguing that the trial court had erred in admitting the genetic genealogy evidence and the newspaper clippings. The Washington State Court of Appeals heard oral arguments in the case on February 18, 2022. On June 30, 2022, the appellate court issued a ruling upholding Pritchard's conviction and sentence. The use of genetic genealogy in this case was proper and did not violate the defendant's constitutional rights, the appellate court wrote. The DNA evidence, combined with the defendant's opportunity and suspicious behavior, was sufficient to support the jury's verdict. Pritchard did not pursue further appeals to the Washington State Supreme Court. His conviction became final on July 30, 2022. In the years since Pritchard's conviction, the Morrison case has been cited in legal journals and forensic science publications as an example of how genetic genealogy can solve decades-old cold cases. The case has also sparked discussion about the ethical and privacy implications of using public genealogical databases for law enforcement purposes. For the Morrison family, the resolution of the case brought a measure of closure, though the pain of Jennifer's loss remains. Dorothy Morrison, now 85 and in declining health, told reporters after Pritchard's sentencing that she felt grateful justice had been served in her lifetime. I never gave up hope, Dorothy Morrison said in an interview with the Bellingham Herald in September 2020, marking 33 years since Jennifer's disappearance. I always believed someone would be held accountable. I just didn't know if I would live to see it. I'm grateful I did. The location of Jennifer Morrison's remains has never been determined, despite extensive searches of Whatcom Falls Park and surrounding areas conducted both in 1987 and after Pritchard's arrest in 2019. Her body has not been recovered. Detectives believe Pritchard concealed Morrison's remains in a remote location that has not yet been identified. Pritchard has refused to cooperate with investigators or provide any information about Morrison's final resting place. In a brief statement to detectives following his conviction, Pritchard said only, "I have nothing to say. My attorney advised me to remain silent, and that's what I'm doing." The lack of a recovery remains a source of pain for the Morrison family. "We would like to bring Jennifer home," Amanda Morrison Walsh said in a 2021 interview. "We'd like to lay her to rest properly in the family plot in Portland where she belongs. But even without that, we know what happened to her. We know who took her from us, and we know he's paying for what he did." The case has had lasting impacts on law enforcement practices in Washington state. The Whatcom County Sheriff's Office expanded its cold case unit following the successful resolution of the Morrison case, and has since reopened 14 additional cold cases for review using genetic genealogy techniques. 3 of those cases have been solved, resulting in arrests. The Morrison case showed us what's possible when we combine preserved evidence with new technology, Detective Maria Santos explained in a 2022 interview. "We're now systematically reviewing every unsolved case with biological evidence to determine if genetic genealogy can provide answers for other families who have been waiting for justice." The Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory established a dedicated genetic genealogy unit in 2020, partially in response to the success of the Morrison investigation. The unit has assisted in solving 11 cold cases across Washington state as of 2024. St. Joseph Hospital, where both Morrison and Pritchard worked in 1987, implemented new security protocols in the wake of the case's resolution. The hospital installed additional lighting and security cameras in all parking areas and established an escort service for employees leaving after evening shifts. "We deeply regret that Jennifer Morrison's safety was compromised while she was part of our hospital community," Hospital Administrator Dr. Patricia Lawrence said in a statement released in 2020. "We've implemented comprehensive safety measures to ensure our employees can work in a secure environment. Jennifer's memory continues to inspire our commitment to staff safety." The case has also had broader implications for the medical community. Several state medical boards, including Washington's, have reviewed protocols for investigating complaints of inappropriate behavior by physicians. The revelation that Pritchard had a documented history of making female colleagues uncomfortable, yet faced no significant consequences, led to calls for stronger accountability mechanisms. The Morrison case exposed systemic failures in how complaints about physician conduct were handled in the 1980s, stated Dr. Nancy Foster, president of the Washington State Medical Association, in a 2021 op-ed. "Those failures may have cost Jennifer Morrison her life. We have a responsibility to ensure such failures never happen again." The genetic genealogy techniques used to solve Morrison's case have since been employed in hundreds of cold cases across the United States. The method has solved high-profile cases, including the identification of the Golden State Killer in California, the NorCal rapist in Northern California, and dozens of other cold cases dating back to the 1960s. However, the technique has also generated controversy regarding privacy and civil liberties. Critics argue that using public genealogical databases for law enforcement purposes raises concerns about genetic privacy and the rights of individuals who submit their DNA for ancestry research. Several states have considered legislation to regulate law enforcement use of genetic genealogy. In response to these concerns, GEDmatch and other genealogical databases have implemented policies requiring users to explicitly opt in to law enforcement matching. The policies were not in effect in 2019 when Morrison's case was investigated, but they reflect evolving societal debates about balancing public safety with individual privacy. "These are important conversations to have," Detective Santos acknowledged. "But I would ask people to consider the Morrison family. They waited 32 years for answers. How many other families are waiting? How many killers are free because we lack the tools to identify them? These are questions society needs to grapple with." For researchers and criminologists, the Morrison case represents a significant data point in understanding delayed justice and the psychological impact of cold cases on victim families. Studies have shown that families of long-term missing persons experience a unique form of grief, sometimes called ambiguous loss, characterized by the inability to achieve closure due to uncertainty about what happened. The resolution of Jennifer Morrison's case, even 32 years later, provided her family with answers that fundamentally changed their grieving process, explained Dr. Rebecca Chen, a forensic psychologist who has studied the psychological impact of cold case resolutions. It transformed ambiguous loss into concrete grief, which, while painful, is something humans are better equipped to process and integrate into their lives. The case has been featured in numerous true crime documentaries and podcasts, bringing national attention to the power of forensic genealogy and the persistence of cold case investigators. The publicity has led to increased tips and information in other cold cases, demonstrating the public's continued interest in seeing justice served, regardless of how much time has passed. In Bellingham, Jennifer Morrison has not been forgotten. In September 2021, on the 34th anniversary of her disappearance, the city dedicated a memorial bench in Bellingham's Maritime Heritage Park overlooking Bellingham Bay. The bench bears a plaque reading, "In memory of Jennifer Ann Morrison, 1959-1987. Dedicated nurse, beloved daughter and sister, forever missed." Dorothy Morrison attended the dedication ceremony, supported by her daughter Amanda and grandchildren. She placed flowers on the bench and told the gathered crowd that she hoped the memorial would serve as a reminder that Jennifer's life mattered, that she was more than just a victim, that she was a person who loved running along the bay, who dedicated herself to caring for others, who had dreams and potential that were stolen from her. "This bench overlooks the water Jennifer loved," Dorothy Morrison said at the ceremony. "It's peaceful here. I like to think she would have loved this spot. And now, people who never knew her will sit here and maybe wonder about the young woman whose name is on this plaque. Maybe they'll remember that every victim of violence was someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone who mattered." The bench has become an informal memorial site. Visitors frequently leave flowers, notes, and tokens. The Bellingham Police Department reports that the bench has generated renewed interest in cold cases, with several individuals coming forward with information about other unsolved crimes after visiting the memorial. As of 2024, Robert Pritchard remains incarcerated at Coyote Ridge Corrections Center. He will be 82 years old when he becomes eligible for release in 2037. He has maintained his innocence in all communications with media and continues to refuse to provide information about Morrison's remains. The Whatcom County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit continues to investigate the location of Morrison's body. Detective Santos, who retired from law enforcement in 2023, stated in her final interview before retirement that she hoped Pritchard would eventually disclose the location as an act of conscience or remorse. "Someone who killed a young woman and concealed her body for 32 years may not have much conscience," Santos acknowledged. "But people do change. As Pritchard ages, faces mortality, perhaps he'll decide to do the right thing and give the Morrison family the closure they deserve. That's my hope anyway." For Dorothy Morrison, now living in a Portland assisted living facility, the resolution of Jennifer's case brought both relief and sorrow. Relief that the person responsible was held accountable. Sorrow that the truth took 32 years to emerge, and that so many years of her life were consumed by uncertainty and grief. "I'm 85 years old now," Dorothy Morrison said in a 2023 interview marking the 36th anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance. "I've lived with this for more than half my life. When people ask me if I have closure now, I tell them yes and no. Yes, because we know what happened. No, because Jennifer is still gone. and I still don't know where her body is. But I'm grateful for the detectives who never gave up, for the scientists who developed the technology to solve her case, and for a justice system that proved it's never too late to hold someone accountable for murder. Amanda Morrison Walsh has become an advocate for families of missing persons and cold case victims. She frequently speaks at conferences and events, sharing her family's experience and emphasizing the importance of preserving evidence in unsolved cases. 32 years ago, when my sister disappeared, the technology to solve her case didn't exist, Amanda said in a 2022 TEDx talk in Seattle. But detectives preserved the evidence anyway. They kept it safe, kept it properly stored, kept the file active even when years passed with no progress. And because they did that, when the technology finally did exist, they could use it. That's the lesson here. Never give up. Preserve evidence. Keep files active. Keep investigating, because you never know when science will catch up, when that one tip will come in, when justice will finally be possible. The Morrison case stands as a testament to the evolution of forensic science and the importance of cold case investigations. It demonstrates that justice delayed is not necessarily justice denied, and that advances in technology can provide answers that seemed impossible in previous eras. For the community of Bellingham, the case served as a sobering reminder that violence can lurk behind professional credentials and respected community standing. It prompted conversations about safety, trust, and the importance of believing women who report uncomfortable or inappropriate behavior. Jennifer Morrison's case changed how we think about workplace safety and accountability, said Bellingham Mayor Seth Fleetwood in a 2021 statement. It reminded us that we must take all complaints seriously, that professional status doesn't exempt anyone from scrutiny, and that safety measures save lives. We owe it to Jennifer's memory to create communities where such tragedies are prevented. As time continues to pass, Jennifer Morrison's case remains a powerful example of persistence in pursuit of justice. The case file that sat in Box 1847C for 31 years ultimately yielded the evidence needed to solve a murder and provide answers to a grieving family. The blood evidence carefully preserved in 1987 became the key to unlocking the truth in 2019. The case serves as inspiration for cold case detectives across the country, proof that no case is truly unsolvable, and that advances in science and investigative techniques can breathe new life into decades-old investigations. It provides hope to families of missing persons that answers may still come, even after years of silence and uncertainty. For the Morrison family, while the pain of Jennifer's loss will never fully heal, the knowledge of what happened and the accountability imposed on her killer has provided a measure of peace. Dorothy Morrison stated in her final interview before her death in August 2024 that she felt grateful to have lived long enough to see justice for her daughter. "I can rest now," Dorothy Morrison said, 3 months before passing away at age 86. "I know who took my Jennifer. I know he's in prison where he belongs. I know Jennifer's story is known, that she's remembered, that she mattered. That's all a mother can ask for when her child is taken from her. Justice came late, but it came, and that has to be enough." Jennifer Ann Morrison's case remains open in one respect. The search for her remains continues. The Whatcom County Sheriff's Office maintains an active tip line for anyone with information about the location of Morrison's body. The department has stated they will never stop searching and will investigate any credible leads, no matter how much time passes. The bench overlooking Bellingham Bay stands as a permanent memorial, a place where Jennifer's family, friends, and strangers can sit and remember a young nurse whose life was cut short, whose disappearance haunted a community for 3 decades, and whose case ultimately demonstrated that persistence, science, and dedication to justice can prevail even against the passage of time. On clear days, when the sun sets over the water and the Olympic Mountains are visible in the distance, visitors to the memorial bench report a sense of peace, as if Jennifer's spirit has found rest after years of being lost and forgotten. Whether that's true or merely comforting imagination, the bench serves its purpose, ensuring Jennifer Morrison is remembered not as a cold case number, but as a person who lived, who cared for others, who had dreams and aspirations, and who, despite dying too young and in tragedy, ultimately received justice. The story of Jennifer Morrison's case is not just about a murder and its resolution. It's about the evolution of forensic science, the dedication of investigators who refuse to let cases go cold, the development of technologies that can reach across decades to identify perpetrators, and the resilience of families who wait years for answers and find the strength to continue when those answers finally come. It's a reminder that in the pursuit of justice, time is not the enemy it seems to be. Evidence properly preserved and cases kept active can wait patiently for science and investigation to catch up. It's a reminder that no case is ever truly cold as long as someone is willing to fight for the victim, for their family, for the truth. And perhaps most importantly, it's a reminder that every victim matters. Every family deserves answers, and justice, no matter how delayed, still has meaning and power. Jennifer Morrison waited 32 years for justice. Her family waited 32 years for answers. But in the end, science, persistence, and dedication to truth prevailed. That is the legacy of Jennifer Morrison's case. Proof that we should never give up, never stop searching, never abandon the pursuit of justice, because someday, somehow, the truth will emerge and accountability will be achieved. For Jennifer, for her family, and for all victims of violence whose cases remain unsolved, that legacy offers hope. The coffee cup that Detective Maria Santos retrieved from Robert Pritchard's garbage in May 2019 contained the DNA that finally solved a 32-year-old mystery. The blood, carefully preserved by evidence technician Scott Palmer in September 1987, held the genetic material that would identify a killer 3 decades later. The case file in box 1847C waited patiently until technology caught up with justice, and a bench overlooking Bellingham Bay now stands as a permanent reminder that Jennifer Ann Morrison, born June 4, 1959, a dedicated nurse, a beloved daughter and sister, a woman who loved running along the water and caring for others, mattered. Her life mattered, her death mattered, and the pursuit of justice in her name mattered. 32 years was far too long, but justice, when it finally arrived, was no less meaningful for the delay. For the Morrison family, for the Bellingham community, and for all who believe that accountability for violence must never be abandoned, Jennifer Morrison's case stands as testament to the power of persistence and the promise that truth, eventually, will prevail.